In 62 Ohio, the cursed Creole who was sold 6 times, but none of her owners lived to tell the tale. Under the grey skies of Ohio in 1862, whispers carried through the damp wind, like secrets too heavy to be spoken aloud. The war between North and South was tearing the nation apart, yet beneath the political turmoil lay another conflict, one far older and darker. It was said that among the enslaved, there was a woman whose name was never recorded in the ledgers, whose eyes could silence a man, and whose curse would follow him to his grave. They called her the Creole. No one knew from which island she had come, only that her presence brought both beauty and ruin. The story begins on a cold January morning when a man named Silas Thornhill arrived at a slave auction near the banks of the Ohio River. The ground was frozen, the air bitter. Silas prided himself on being a man of logic, a merchant who dealt in property, not superstition. But when he first saw her standing among the trembling figures, he felt a chill crawl down his spine. She did not cry or beg. She only stared back at him, calm as still water, her hands bound, her silence louder than any plea. They said she had been sold 6 times before, 6 masters, each wealthier than the last. 6 men who met death so strange that even the newspapers refused to print the details. Some claimed she carried an island curse, something born of salt water and sorrow. Others whispered that she was an avenger of the enslaved, sent to punish those who treated people as property. But Thornhill did not believe in ghosts or vengeance. He believed in profit. And so he placed his bid. From the moment he brought her to his estate outside Cincinnati, the air seemed to change. The servants complained of cold drafts, even in the kitchen fires. Horses grew skittish at night, and in the corners of the house, faint singing could be heard, low, melodic, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Silas dismissed it as the imagination of frightened minds. But the song always stopped the moment he entered a room, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Neighbors began to notice the change in him. He stopped attending church. His once booming trade faltered. Letters from his partners went unanswered. At night, a faint light flickered from his attic window, though no candle could be seen when morning came. Some said he was bewitched. Others said guilt had found him at last. Weeks passed, and Thornhill's wife reported hearing voices, soft and foreign, whispering through the floorboards. One night, she claimed she saw the Creole woman standing in the garden, her white dress billowing though there was no wind. Her eyes, she said, glowed like lanterns. The next morning, the woman was gone. Only the iron shackles remained on the post where she had been chained. By spring, Thornhill was dead. His body was found seated at his desk, untouched, eyes wide open, a half-written letter trembling in his stiff hand. The paper read only, "She has come for me." When the sheriff arrived, the townsfolk crowded the property, searching for the woman. But she had vanished without a trace. Some claimed she fled north through the Underground Railroad. Others insisted she returned to the river, to the place where her curse began. Yet wherever she went, death followed. And here lies the mystery that has haunted Ohio's old families for more than a century. Every man who claimed ownership of that woman died before the next full moon. Their homes burned, their families disappeared, and the local church records were mysteriously erased. What none of them knew was that something still remained hidden beneath Thornhill's estate. Something carved into the walls of the cellar, a series of markings no one could translate. They said it was a language of the dead, a message for those who dared disturb her story. Stay until the very end, because the last clue, found decades later by a team of historians, may finally reveal what she truly was. And believe me, no one was prepared for what they discovered buried under that Ohio soil. If you're drawn to the shadows of forgotten history, to the stories the world tried to erase, you've come to the right place. Because by the end of this tale, you'll understand why her name was never written, and why those who spoke it out loud never lived to tell the tale. The year was 1862, a time when Ohio stood at the uneasy crossroads between two Americas. To the south, the war raged on, brother against brother, a nation tearing itself apart over freedom and chains. To the north, whispers of abolition filled the air, but so did fear, fear of what true freedom would cost. The Underground Railroad wove silently beneath the farms and barns of this border state, a living artery of courage pulsing through the shadows. And yet, for every man or woman who escaped, there were dozens dragged back into darkness. In the heart of this fragile territory, just outside the small town of Ripley, stood the Thornhill Estate. Locals called it the House Between Worlds. Its grand facade was a mask for something rotten beneath. The mansion was built upon old foundations, stone tunnels, rumored to connect to the river, used once for smuggling, or perhaps for something older still. Travelers along the Ohio River would often see a faint light glowing from its upper windows long after midnight, though no one lived there anymore. The records say the estate was built by Colonel Everett Thornhill, Silas's father, a man who grew rich off sugar and human suffering in Louisiana before settling in Ohio. He had brought with him not only his fortune but also something else, something he claimed to have taken from an island where the wind itself could curse a man. When he died, that object vanished. So did two servants. Some whispered that the Creole woman had been one of them, stolen from the Caribbean and hidden away for years before being sold again. By the 1860s, the Thornhill estate was more rumor than residence. Locals avoided it. Children dared each other to walk past its gates after sundown. Old women swore that the cries of the enslaved still echoed through its cellar. And yet, the strangest part of all was how history itself seemed to forget it. Newspapers that once mentioned the Thornhills stopped printing their name. Property records vanished. It was as if the entire lineage had been erased by an unseen hand. Those who investigated later found fragments, a diary page, a torn letter, a rusted key engraved with a symbol no one could decipher. They all spoke of the same event. A night in late autumn when a storm struck the estate and a fire consumed part of its west wing. The flames, they said, burned blue. Witnesses claimed they saw a figure standing in the blaze, a woman in white, her eyes reflecting the storm. But when dawn came, no body was found. Only a chain melted into the floor like wax. That was the same year the Civil War reached its bloodiest turn. Men were dying by the thousands on battlefields, and yet here in Ohio, another war, quieter, more personal, was unfolding beneath the surface. Churches whispered about curses, about blood oaths carried through generations. Some said the Thornhills had angered something older than the nation itself. When historians returned decades later, they found the land overgrown and silent. The house had collapsed, but beneath it remained the tunnels, narrow, airless, carved deep into the limestone. Along the walls, strange carvings were etched into the rock, spirals, faces, and words that blended English with Creole and something else entirely. The deeper they went, the colder it became, until even the air felt thick with unseen eyes. One explorer wrote in his journal that he heard voices whispering his name. Another swore that he saw footprints in the dust, though he was alone. And in the deepest chamber, where the tunnel ended, they found a single rusted shackle hanging from the ceiling, just one, as though waiting for someone to return. The ground around the Thornhill property has always been restless. Farmers who tried to cultivate the soil said nothing grew there. Their cattle refused to graze near it. Even today, when the wind passes over the river, it seems to carry a faint rhythm, a melody too slow, too human, too sorrowful to be the sound of mere wind. This is the world in which her story takes root, a world where freedom and damnation shared the same horizon, where the living prayed not to see the dead, and the dead waited patiently to be remembered. Beneath the civil war of men, another war, unseen, eternal, raged on between justice and vengeance. And it was in this uneasy silence, in this small, forgotten corner of Ohio, that a woman without a name was sold once again. Her story written not on paper, but in the echoes of those who never came back from the Thornhill tunnels. Her name was never written, but the few who dared to speak of her called her Celeste. Whether that name was her own or a mercy from someone who pitied her, no one could say. She was Creole, her voice soft and musical, her eyes a strange shade of amber that seemed to hold both fire and grief. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried a quiet power that lingered in the air like smoke. Celeste had known chains long before Ohio. Rumor said she came from an island where French and African blood had mixed under a brutal sun, a place where the enslaved whispered prayers that could wound the soul of a cruel man. As a young girl, she was sold to a sugar plantation in Louisiana, where her first master died only a month after her arrival. A death the doctors could not explain. Then another and another. By the time she reached Ohio, she had been sold 6 times. And with each master's passing, her legend grew darker. To the Thornhills, she was nothing more than property, a body to be used, a symbol of wealth and power. To the other servants, she was something far greater. They spoke of her with awe, fear, and a strange reverence. She carried herself differently from anyone they had ever seen. Her back straight, even under a whip, her eyes unflinching even in silence. She worked quietly, often humming songs in a language no one could understand, songs that seemed to make the air heavier, the night colder. Among the slaves of the Thornhill estate was a boy named Samuel. Barely 16, Samuel had grown up under the shadow of the Thornhill family. His mother taken to the fields, his father sold south when he was a child. Samuel was drawn to Celeste's presence like a moth to a candle flame. She treated him with gentleness, speaking to him when others would not. At night, she told him stories in whispers, stories of oceans that glowed red, of gods who avenged the innocent, and of spirits who never forgot a broken promise. In her eyes, Samuel saw something he could not name, sorrow, perhaps, but also resolve. Once, he asked her if she was afraid of dying. She smiled faintly and said, "Child, death is a door, but not everyone who opens it walks through." Those words would stay with him long after. Silas Thornhill, meanwhile, grew increasingly restless. He had expected obedience, not the strange, quiet rebellion that seemed to follow Celeste wherever she went. He tried to control her, to break her, to prove that whatever curse haunted her name was just superstition. But with every attempt, his world began to unravel. His crops failed, his workers fled, his wife refused to sleep under the same roof. There was also Margaret Thornhill, Silas's wife, a woman who once believed herself untouchable. But as the nights grew longer, she began to dream of a woman standing beside her bed, watching her with those burning amber eyes. The dreams came night after night, until she could no longer tell sleep from waking. One morning, she found her hands covered in soot, though no fire had been lit. From that day on, she refused to look Celeste in the eye. For those who served in the Thornhill household, the fear became a living thing. Doors opened by themselves, candles flickered without wind, and the scent of salt water clung to the halls, though the sea was hundreds of miles away. Celeste remained calm, working silently, her face unreadable. Yet when she thought no one watched, her gaze drifted toward the old tunnels beneath the house, as if she were waiting for something or someone to emerge from the darkness. One night, Samuel found her there, standing before the locked cellar door, a single candle in her hand. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. She looked at him and smiled softly. "Neither should they," she replied, her voice barely a breath. Then she pressed her palm to the door, and the flame of the candle flickered blue. That was the moment Samuel realized that Celeste's story was not one of mere survival. It was something older, something sacred and terrifying. Whatever bound her to the Thornhills went deeper than chains. She was not only a victim of their cruelty, she was the keeper of their fate. And as he watched her descend into the dark, candle trembling in her hand, he understood why every man who tried to possess her never lived to tell the tale. It began with the sound of dripping water, slow, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing through the stone belly of the Thornhill estate. Samuel was the first to hear it. He had gone to fetch firewood before dawn when he noticed the sound rising from beneath the cellar floor. The air down there was thick and cold, carrying the scent of wet earth and iron. No one dared to enter the tunnels without permission, yet something in that sound pulled him closer. When he reached the old wooden door, the one Celeste had touched the night before, he found it slightly ajar. The lock, a heavy iron clasp that had rusted shut years ago, was broken clean in two, as if by a great force. Inside, the darkness seemed alive, swallowing the faint light of his candle. The dripping grew louder. He stepped inside. The walls were damp, covered with moss and strange markings he had never seen before. Spirals and crosses mixed with unfamiliar symbols, drawn not with chalk, but something darker, something that looked like dried blood. Samuel's hands trembled as he traced one of them. It was warm. At the far end of the passage, he saw it, a small wooden box resting on a stone table. It looked ancient, the kind of thing no one should touch. A symbol identical to the one burned into Celeste's shackles was carved into its lid. The closer he got, the stronger the air seemed to hum, vibrating with a low, almost human moan. Then from behind him came a soft voice. "Do not open it." He turned, and there she was, Celeste, her face half hidden by the dim light, her candle burning with that strange blue flame again. She looked neither angry nor afraid, only sad. "It is not for them," she said. "It was never meant for their hands." Samuel asked what it was, but she only shook her head. "It is a promise, one that cannot be broken twice." Before he could speak again, she took the box and held it against her chest. Her eyes closed, as if she were listening to something deep within the earth. Then she whispered words in a tongue he didn't understand, soft, rhythmic, almost a lullaby. The candle flickered violently, casting long shadows on the walls. For a moment, the markings seemed to move, twisting like living veins. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air. The flame went out, plunging them into darkness. Samuel felt a rush of cold air sweep past him, carrying the faint scent of salt and decay. When he relit the candle, Celeste was gone. Only the box remained on the stone table, and beneath it, carved deep into the surface, were fresh words, words that had not been there before. He bent closer and read them aloud. 6 names, 6 debts, 1 remains. That night, he told no one what he'd seen. But the next morning, the estate was buzzing with fear. One of the overseers, a man named Harlan Pike, had been found dead in the stables, his eyes open, his lips blackened as though burned from within. The doctor called it a heart attack. The servants whispered otherwise. They said they'd heard singing in the night, a woman's voice echoing from the cellar. When Silas Thornhill learned of Pike's death, he locked the tunnels and forbade anyone from going below. But the damage was already done. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said the house was cursed. Others swore Celeste had called upon something that refused to rest. Samuel tried to find her, but she was nowhere to be seen. Only that strange melody remained, faint, distant, and sorrowful, seeping through the cracks in the floor, reminding everyone that something beneath the Thornhill estate had awakened, and though no one dared say it aloud, they all knew the same truth. The curse had begun again. By the time the spring rain came, the Thornhill estate had fallen under an invisible weight. The servants moved like shadows, whispering prayers under their breath. Even the birds avoided the rooftop, as if the very air carried a warning. Silas Thornhill tried to hold on to order with a trembling hand, but the more control he demanded, the faster it slipped through his fingers. He had always believed himself to be a man of reason, a self-made master who needed no god to justify his power. But now, each night brought new horrors, the sound of chains rattling in empty halls, doors slamming though no wind blew, candles burning with blue light before dying all at once. He blamed the servants, accused them of rebellion. He beat Samuel for knowing too much, though the boy refused to speak of the box or the words carved into the stone. Silas began keeping Celeste in the upper attic, locked away from the others. He told himself it was to maintain peace, but everyone knew the truth. He feared her, yet even locked away, she was never truly silent. Her songs traveled through the beams and floorboards, soft and low, seeping into dreams. The workers claimed to wake in the night to see faces in their mirrors, eyes like burning amber, staring back. Margaret Thornhill, once the estate's proud mistress, had grown pale and frail. She no longer left her room. "She visits me," Margaret whispered to her husband one night, voice shaking. "She stands by my bed and weeps. I can feel the tears. They burn." Silas struck her for speaking such nonsense, but when he turned, the window behind him slammed shut on its own. Word spread to the nearby towns of a cursed woman kept prisoner, of strange deaths and eerie lights seen by travelers passing the river road. A local preacher came to the house, urging Silas to release her. "No curse binds itself without reason," he warned. "If she carries vengeance, it is because it was earned." Silas laughed and sent him away. That night, a thunderstorm rolled across the valley. The rain came down in sheets, flooding the fields. The old oak behind the house split in half, with a deafening crack. The servants swore they heard screams carried by the wind, voices crying from beneath the earth. When morning came, 2 workers were missing, their beds empty, their boots still by the door. Samuel was sent to the attic to deliver food to Celeste, though Silas forbade him from speaking to her. When he entered, she was sitting by the window, looking out toward the swollen river. Her chains lay coiled at her feet, unfastened. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. She turned to him, eyes glowing faintly in the grey light. "Do you think he can own me?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. His hands shook as he handed her the plate. "They say you bring death," he said at last. She smiled faintly. "I bring truth, but men like him call it death." In that moment, Samuel saw something in her expression, not hatred but grief, as if every cruel act, every lash, every scream that had ever echoed through those walls lived inside her like ghosts. "They think they can bury what they've done," she said, "but the earth remembers, the river remembers, and I—" Her voice faltered. "I am what memory becomes when justice is denied." Before he could reply, the attic door flew open. Silas stood there, face red with fury. He grabbed Samuel by the collar and threw him down the stairs. "You think I don't see your games?" he shouted. "You'll not poison my house with your lies." Then he turned to Celeste, eyes burning. "You want to haunt me, woman? Then haunt me in chains." He struck her, once, twice. The sound of it echoed through the hall like thunder. She did not cry out. She only looked at him, steady, unbroken. And for the first time, Silas Thornhill stepped back, fear flickering behind his rage. Outside, lightning split the sky. The house trembled, and somewhere deep below, beneath the cellar and the tunnels, a low hum began to rise again. The same pulse Samuel had heard weeks before. It spread through the walls, through the very ground, as if the earth itself was awakening in answer to her pain. That night, none of them slept. And by dawn, one more man would be found dead, his body twisted near the old oak, eyes wide open toward the heavens, as though he had seen something too terrible to name. The morning after the storm, a heavy fog rolled in from the river, swallowing the Thornhill estate whole. The house stood silent, its windows dim, its chimneys cold. The workers gathered at the edge of the property, whispering prayers in low voices. None dared to step inside until Silas himself appeared on the porch, face pale, eyes hollow. He said nothing, only gestured for them to dig near the old oak tree where the last lightning had struck. It was Samuel who found it first, a patch of soil blackened not by fire, but by something darker. The earth seemed to breathe, pulsing faintly, and when his shovel struck something solid, the sound was not of wood, but of metal. They dug until the shape revealed itself, an iron cross, thick and heavy, its surface etched with the same markings from the tunnels below. At its center, embedded like a heart, was a name carved in jagged letters. E. Thornhill. Silas's face drained of color. That was his father's name. He ordered everyone to stop digging, shouting that it was an old family relic, but the workers refused. The ground beneath the cross was soft, almost wet. When they lifted it free, a hollow space yawned open beneath it, a hidden chamber. From within came a smell of salt and decay, and something else, faint, sweet, like burning sugar. Samuel peered down into the darkness and saw bones, hundreds of them, skulls, ribs, the remains of shackles. They weren't buried in order, they had been thrown there, discarded like trash. The chamber stretched deep beneath the house, deeper than anyone had imagined. Someone screamed. Another man fell to his knees and began praying. Silas stumbled backward, muttering to himself, "It was never supposed to be here, not here." He tried to fill the hole, but the earth refused to take it. The rain had turned the ground into mud, and every shovelful slid back into the pit, as though the land itself rejected the cover. That night, no one remained outside. The servants locked themselves in the kitchens. Samuel hid in the stable, clutching the small wooden cross his mother had left him years ago. The air was thick with fear. From the attic, faint singing drifted down again. Celeste's voice, slow and mournful, echoing through the hollow halls. Margaret Thornhill began screaming shortly after midnight. Samuel ran inside, and what he saw froze his blood. The lady of the house stood in the hallway, drenched in sweat, clawing at her own neck. "They're here!" she gasped. "They're in the walls!" Her eyes darted toward the staircase, and when Samuel followed her gaze, he saw handprints, dark and wet, smearing their way up the banister. He followed them to the attic. The door was open, the chains on the floor. Celeste was gone. Only her dress remained, neatly folded on the chair beside the window. And on the wall, written in something that glistened black under the moonlight, were the same words Samuel had read in the cellar. 6 names, 6 debts, 1 remains. Below, Silas tore through the house in panic, shouting her name, calling her every curse he could muster. Mirrors shattered as he passed. Windows burst open, though no wind blew. He ran to the cellar where the tunnels waited, his boots splashing through the mud. The others followed at a distance, drawn by the sounds. The cracks, the whispers, the faint hum rising again from beneath the ground. They found him standing before the stone table, the wooden box open in his hands. Inside lay strands of hair, 6 rusted nails, and a small wax figure pierced through the chest. The air around him shimmered with heat, though the tunnel was freezing. "She made this," he whispered, "for each of us." His voice broke into a laugh, low, hysterical. "But she forgot one thing. She belongs to me." He threw the box to the floor and stomped on it, breaking it apart. The moment the wax cracked, the candlelight went out. A wind roared through the tunnels, deafening and cold. And then, silence. When Samuel relit the lantern, Silas was gone. Only his coat remained, lying in a puddle of black water that steamed like hot tar. The others fled the house before dawn, but Samuel stayed behind, staring into the darkness where Silas had vanished. He could still hear her voice, faint and distant, carried by the wind through the tunnel, a single word whispered again and again. justice. And as the first light of morning broke over the Thornhill estate, the fog lifted just enough to reveal footprints, bare and wet, leading from the cellar door toward the river. Days passed, and Thornhill Manor stood silent once more. The townsfolk spoke of what happened in hushed tones, of Silas's disappearance, of the bones beneath the soil, of the servants who swore they'd seen a woman's shadow by the river at dawn. But no one dared return to the estate, no one except Samuel. He couldn't leave it behind. Something in him needed answers, not just about Celeste, but about the mark on that iron cross, the name carved in its center, and the words on the wall. 6 names, 6 debts, 1 remains. On the 3rd night after Silas vanished, Samuel came back. The fog had returned, thicker than ever, wrapping the manor like a shroud. He carried only a lantern and a leather-bound Bible, though the pages inside were swollen with damp and time. He pushed open the front doors. They groaned as if waking from sleep, and the air inside was stale, heavy with the smell of candle wax and river mud. He walked through the hallway toward the library, where Silas had once kept the family records. Dust clung to everything. On the desk, he found a journal, its cover embossed with the same symbol as the Iron Cross. The handwriting inside was Silas's, but the entries were written in 2 voices, alternating between his and someone else's, a woman's, elegant but trembling. The last entry was dated the night before the storm. He says the river forgives nothing. He says the dead are restless, but he does not know. I have already paid. Samuel's breath caught. The ink was still wet. As he turned the page, something slipped out. A photograph, old and cracked. It showed Silas standing beside a woman in a white dress, holding hands beneath the oak tree. Celeste. But behind them, barely visible, was another figure, identical to her, the same face, the same eyes. 2 Celestes. He flipped the photograph over. In faint handwriting, barely legible, were the words, 1 born free, 1 kept bound. The lantern flickered. From upstairs came a slow creak, a footstep, then another. Samuel froze, his pulse hammering in his throat. He called out softly, "Celeste?" No answer, only the sound of dripping water, rhythmic and steady, echoing from the staircase. He climbed, each step heavier than the last. The attic door was open again. This time the air inside was warm, impossibly warm. The room glowed faintly, as though the very walls were breathing light. On the floor, where Celeste's folded dress had been, lay something new, a second wooden box, untouched, its lid sealed with wax. Samuel knelt, his hands trembling as he pried it open. Inside was a single object, a locket. He clicked it open, expecting a picture. Instead, there was a scrap of parchment folded tight. He unfolded it and read the words written in blood-red ink. "You freed the wrong one." The lantern went out. For a long moment, the only sound was Samuel's breathing, shallow, desperate. Then, from behind him, a whisper brushed his ear, soft as silk. "She's still here." He turned, and the attic was empty. Only the open window swayed gently in the night air, the fog outside glowing pale against the moon. But on the floor, beside his boot, a single wet footprint appeared, and followed by another. They led not to the window, but toward the cellar. Samuel descended the narrow staircase into the cellar, the air thick with earth and the faint metallic tang of old blood. His lantern flickered weakly, the light bending against the dark as though it feared what lay ahead. The steps creaked, ancient and uneven, until his boots met the damp soil floor. The walls were lined with decaying barrels, their labels too faded to read, and between them hung chains, some broken, others still locked, their keys rusted beyond use. He swept the light across the room and stopped. On the far wall was a door, smaller than the rest, its frame crooked and blackened by moisture. Carved into the wood were symbols, the same ones etched into the locket and the iron cross. Above them, faint but unmistakable, was a name: Celeste D. He pressed his palm to the door. It shuddered slightly, and a gust of air escaped from behind it, colder than the grave. He pushed it open. Beyond lay a hidden tunnel, bricked with red clay, stretching deep beneath the manor. The walls were slick, and in places the mortar was darkened by something that looked too much like dried blood. As Samuel advanced, the whispers began. Faint at first, like a distant hymn, then louder, layered, overlapping. The voices were women's, countless voices, murmuring in a language older than English. He followed them until the tunnel widened into a cavernous chamber. At its center stood a stone altar cracked with age. Upon it were 6 iron tags, each engraved with a name and date. The first 5 were crossed out with black soot, but the last was clean. Celeste D., 1862. Samuel's breath trembled. He touched the tag, and the ground beneath him pulsed. The whispers turned into screams, filling the chamber with echoes of agony. He stumbled back, his lantern nearly falling from his grasp. And that's when he saw the carvings on the walls, hundreds of names, etched by hand, layer over layer, spanning decades. Among them were the names of every known owner of Thornhill Manor, and each was marked with the same symbol from the locket. They hadn't just died mysteriously, they had been claimed. In the corner of the chamber, a shape moved. Samuel raised his light, revealing a narrow passage leading upward. At the top, through a rotted hatch, he found a crawl space beneath the floorboards of the parlor. Inside was a leather-bound journal wrapped in black ribbon. Its pages were brittle, written in 2 hands, one bold, one trembling. The first belonged to Silas, the second, Celeste. Silas's entries spoke of greed, power and fear, of how he had discovered the curse when he inherited the manor, how every previous owner had died within 6 months, and how he'd become convinced that freeing Celeste would break the cycle. But Celeste's entries told a different story. She had been born free, the daughter of a Creole mother and a French trader, but was kidnapped and sold under a false name. Her twin sister, still enslaved, had been hidden within the manor by their captor. And the curse, if it could be called that, began when Celeste vowed no owner would live to profit from their pain. Each death had been a message, each haunting, an act of rebellion. Samuel felt the weight of it, the injustice, the rage, the sorrow stretching across generations. He closed the journal, but before he could stand, the air shifted again. From above, the sound of music, faint, ghostly, drifted through the cracks. A violin, playing a slow Creole melody. He climbed through the hatch into the parlor. The room was bathed in pale light, though every candle was unlit. In the center stood the same wooden box from the attic, open now. Inside was the locket glowing faintly, and beside it, carved into the wood, were fresh words that hadn't been there before. The river remembers. The debt is not yet paid. Samuel stared in silence as the melody faded into nothingness. Then, just before the lantern sputtered out, he saw the reflection of a woman's face in the glass, not behind him, but beside him. Her eyes sorrowful, her expression neither vengeful nor at peace, Celeste, or what remained of her, waiting for the one name still left uncrossed. The air inside Thornhill Manor had changed. Samuel could feel it pressing against his chest, heavy and deliberate, as if the house itself were breathing. The violin's last note still lingered in the air, a tremor that vibrated through the floorboards and into his bones. He turned slowly toward the open box. The faint glow from the locket pulsed in rhythm with the beat of his heart. One steady light surrounded by centuries of darkness. He picked it up. The metal was ice cold, though there was no draft in the room. As his fingers brushed its surface, the glow flared, and a vision overtook him. Not a dream, but a living memory carved into the very walls of the manor. He was no longer in the parlor, but standing in a grand room bathed in lamplight. The same walls but alive with color and sound. The year was 1862. Silas Thornhill stood at the center holding a contract with trembling hands. Before him knelt Celeste, her wrists bound, her head raised, her eyes defiant. The air smelled of burnt tobacco and iron. "You will serve this house," Silas said, voice cracking, "and in return you will be spared." Celeste smiled faintly, the kind of smile that makes men tremble, the smile of someone who has already decided the outcome. "No one who owns this house," she whispered, "will ever be spared." A flash of light, a scream, the vision dissolved. Samuel staggered backward into the present, the locket burning against his palm. He tried to drop it, but it clung to his skin as if fused by invisible hands. The fire from the hearth erupted, spreading shadows across the room that moved independently of the flames. From those shadows, figures began to form. Silhouettes of men and women, each marked with the same brand, each staring directly at him. Their mouths moved, but the sound that came out was not speech. It was the sound of chains dragging through water, of soil being shoveled onto graves. Samuel's knees buckled, then one voice rose above the rest, Celeste's. "You opened the path," she said, her tone neither angry nor kind. "Now you will see what they tried to bury." The floor beneath him groaned and split open, revealing the tunnel below. The same red clay, the same altar, but now the chamber was filled with light, spectral and white. The iron tags glowed, lifting slowly into the air until they hovered before him. Each tag shimmered, revealing not just the names of owners, but the dates of their deaths, all the same day and month. October 12th. Samuel's breath caught. That was today. A hand, cold, unseen, touched his shoulder. He turned and saw Celeste standing there, fully formed now, her dress tattered, but her face calm. Her eyes, however, were filled with unbearable grief. "I did not curse them," she said softly. "They cursed themselves. Every man who took this land bought it with blood that was never his to claim." The truth struck like lightning. The so-called curse was not supernatural vengeance. It was history itself, clawing back what had been stolen. The deaths, the madness, the hauntings, all were echoes of justice denied. Celeste reached for the locket, and for the first time, it released Samuel's hand. She opened it. Inside, instead of a portrait, there was a scrap of parchment, brittle, yellowed, with a list of names written in faded ink. The last name was unfinished, the pen stroke cutting off abruptly. Beneath it, blank space. Celeste looked up at him. "Every soul bound to this land must be remembered, or it begins again." Samuel understood. The sixth owner was never meant to die by her hand. The curse demanded remembrance, not blood. To end the cycle, someone had to tell her story truthfully, to speak her name aloud without chains. The manor shook violently. The spirit screamed as the light grew brighter, the air vibrating with centuries of pain and release. Samuel raised his voice above the noise. "Celeste Desormeaux," he shouted, "you are remembered." The ground erupted in blinding white. Then, silence. When Samuel awoke, he was lying outside the manor, the dawn just beginning to rise. The house stood behind him, silent and whole, but every window was darkened, not by shadow, but by the reflection of faces, hundreds of them watching. The journal lay beside him, open to a new page that hadn't existed before. In neat handwriting it read, "The curse is lifted when the story is told, but those who tell it must never forget." The locket rested on the cover, no longer glowing. Inside it was a single line of fresh ink written in Celeste's hand. "Remember me, and I will rest." Samuel closed it gently. He looked once more at the manor, its silhouette now calm against the morning light, and knew what he had to do. The story had survived the silence of centuries, but it was not over. The curse had changed its form. It now lived not in the house, but in memory, in every person who heard the tale and dared to believe it. And as he walked away from Thornhill Manor, the faint echo of a violin followed him down the road, soft, mournful, and eternal. The dawn over Thornhill Manor broke with a pale, uncertain light, the kind that neither promises warmth nor fully dispels the night. The house stood still, its windows reflecting only the quiet fields of Ohio, untouched by the blood and memory it once held. For the first time in more than a century, there were no whispers, no footsteps in the dark, no unseen eyes staring from the shadows. Yet the silence itself felt sacred, the sound of something ancient finally exhaling. Samuel remained on the road for a long time, his gaze fixed on the house. He could not decide whether it looked peaceful or hollow, perhaps both. In his hand, the locket no longer burned, but its weight seemed greater, as if it carried not metal, but truth. He opened it one final time. The ink inside had dried into permanence. "Remember me, and I will rest." He whispered her name again, Celeste Desormeaux. The words trembled in the air, half prayer, half confession. And in that fragile sound was the meaning of it all. That history does not die when the bodies are gone. It lingers, waiting for someone to speak it aloud. The people who once owned Thornhill Manor believed they could purchase lives, silence voices, and bury their sins under new foundations. But the earth remembers. The walls remember. And perhaps the greatest horror of all is not that ghosts exist, but that the living spend so much effort trying to forget them. Samuel returned to his small home in town and began to write. The journal he found became his compass, its pages guiding him through a labyrinth of buried names and erased stories. Each line he wrote was an act of resurrection, each sentence an apology, centuries overdue. Weeks passed, then months. The townspeople whispered about the man who never stopped writing, whose candle burned through every night. Some said he had gone mad, obsessed with a cursed name. But Samuel knew madness had nothing to do with it. It was duty, the kind born from witnessing a truth too vast to ignore. He traced the origins of Celeste's name through auction records, birth ledgers, and fragments of church registers. What he discovered was not just her story, but the story of hundreds. People sold, silenced, and forgotten in the crevices of American history. The curse that haunted Thornhill was only the echo of a larger one, the human capacity to erase suffering when it becomes inconvenient. Every injustice leaves an imprint. Every hidden wound demands remembrance. That was Celeste's vengeance. Not the death of her owners, but the death of their silence. Samuel's writings spread quietly, first as letters, then as pamphlets, and finally as a compiled record. People read them with disbelief, then shame, then reverence. In time, the name Celeste Desormeaux became known again, her story told in schools, her grave marked by a plaque that read, "Born free, bound by cruelty, freed by truth." And though no one ever heard the violin again, those who visited Thornhill claimed they could sometimes feel a sudden stillness in the air. Not cold, not frightening, just aware, as if the house itself was listening, ensuring that her name would not fade. Perhaps that is how history truly heals, not through vengeance, but through remembrance, through the courage to look unflinchingly at the cruelty that built our foundations and to say, never again, never forgotten. The curse was never a haunting. It was a reminder. And as Samuel closed his final notebook, placing the locket upon its cover, he understood that Celeste's story had never been his to keep. It belonged to everyone who carried within them even a spark of conscience, a belief that truth, no matter how dark, deserves to be seen. The river beyond the fields whispered softly, carrying the morning light downstream, and for the first time in 163 years, Thornhill Manor stood without fear, not cleansed, not redeemed, but remembered. If you made it this far, you already know this wasn't just a ghost story. It was a cry buried beneath centuries of silence. And tonight, we heard it together. Celeste's name lived again because you stayed, because you listened. But her memory, and the memories of thousands like hers, survive only if we keep speaking them. So I want to ask you something. What would you have done if you had found that journal? Would you have opened the locket? Would you have dared to read what was inside, and knowing it could change the way you see history forever? Tell me in the comments below. Type. I remember Celeste. If her story moved you. Or write what you think justice truly means when time has already tried to erase it. Because here, in this community, every word you leave becomes part of the memory. Another voice against forgetting. And remember that promise from the beginning of the video, the exclusive truth only for those who stayed until the end. Here it is. After the manor was sealed, the local archives reported a missing page from the property deeds of 1862. No one knows who removed it, but one corner of that torn paper carried a single handwritten word. Returned. What if that word wasn't about land, but about a soul finally finding its way home? If this story reached you, if it made you feel something between sorrow and awe, then you belong here. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss the next hidden piece of our dark history. Every week, we uncover truths buried under dust and lies, tales of injustice, vengeance, and redemption that shape the world we live in today. And who knows, the next story might be even closer to you than you think. So go ahead, comment your thoughts, share this video, and let's keep the memory alive together. Because in the end, history isn't what's written in books. It's what we choose to remember. The story of Celeste Desormeaux ends here. Or at least, that's what we want to believe. But some stories never end. They only shift, waiting for new voices to carry them forward. Thornhill Manor stands silent now, its shutters sealed, its halls empty. Yet those who pass along the old Ohio road at night still speak of the faint echo of a violin drifting through the trees, soft, mournful, and impossibly distant. Some say it's just the wind. Others aren't so sure. And maybe that's the point. History's ghosts don't always want to scare us. Sometimes they only want to be remembered. As the sun sets behind the fields that once hid tunnels and sorrow, one truth remains unshaken. The past doesn't stay buried. It waits, patient, persistent, whispering to those willing to listen. Celeste's curse was never vengeance. It was remembrance. And now that we've spoken her name, the question becomes, who will we remember next? Because there are still countless names carved into history's shadows, stories lost between pages, erased from records, silenced by fear or greed. Somewhere out there lies another locket, another journal, another truth buried under the weight of time. Next week, we'll open one of those forgotten doors. We'll travel to 1890 Louisiana, where a church fire consumed an entire congregation. But one body was never found. Locals swore they saw a figure walking through the smoke, untouched by the flames, carrying a single rosary that refused to burn. Was it divine intervention, or something far more haunting? If you felt the chill of Celeste's story tonight, if her name will echo in your mind long after the screen fades to black, then you're part of something greater. You're part of the circle that refuses to let these forgotten lives vanish. T'aime. I guard the memory. Oh. In the comments below if you'll be here for the next mystery. Together we'll keep digging through the ashes of history, uncovering the truths that time tried to silence. Thank you for staying until the end, for feeling, remembering, and daring to look where others have turned away. Because this isn't just a channel, it's a lantern in the dark. And the flame will burn again in the next story, when another name rises from the shadows and another truth refuses to die.